Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a couple of points about wage stagnation, since our colleagues have brought that up. Wage stagnation has, there are many causes for that, and I'd like to point out the National Small Business Association's annual survey of their members. Employers reported the average cost of their monthly health insurance premiums per employee increased from $590 in 2009 prior to the Affordable Care Act to $1,121 in 2014. And I'd like to point out that's before the major increase in premiums that we've seen the last year or so. And in addition to that, they paid out another $458 a month just in other health care related costs per employee. So when you're spending that kind of money on increases in health insurance premiums and health care costs, it will necessarily reduce the amount that you have to pay in wages, and it still is compensation. The other thing I want to point out is the American Action Forum, which tracks the cost of regulation, reported that the Obama administration levied $181.5 billion in regulatory costs just in 2014. That's $692 per capita for each American, which drives down people's spending power. And that's a hidden cost. Ms. Gessler, get back to the topic. By the way, if we want to have a discussion about stolen elections, I think it would be appropriate to bring Senator Sanders in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would shifting to a defined contribution retirement system look like for federal employees, federal government workers, Ms. Gessler?
So the way that I have envisioned it is anybody with 25 years or more of service would be grandfathered into the current system. Nothing's going to change for them. For all new hires or anybody that has fewer than 5 years of service, those people who have not yet become vested in their pensions, they'd be shifted to defined contribution system, just playing on the existing thrift savings plan that federal employees already have. And so the contribution to that for the government, currently it's between 1% and 5%. That would increase to between 4% and 8%. Existing federal employees with between 5 and 25 years of service would have 3 different choices. They can do the same thing that the new hires are doing, and they can shift entirely to that defined contribution system with a much higher match and overall contribution. And they can choose to take essentially a lump sum benefit. Everything that they've accrued in their pension, they take that value, and it goes into their thrift savings plan. Alternatively, they could choose to basically freeze their defined benefit pension as it is. They keep everything that is accrued. They'll still have a defined benefit pension in retirement, but going forward, they're in that new system, and they have the higher contribution to their thrift savings plan. Or they can stay in the existing system, can keep the same level of defined benefit, but there will be some changes going forward only. Nothing taken away, because this was part of their compensation, and I would never argue that we should take away something that was really a past. It was essentially in their paychecks. So we don't take that away. But going forward, they would probably pay a little bit higher percentage of their overall contribution. The retirement age may increase, and some other small changes along those lines.
Can you give me a fairly brief answer on what kind of cost savings we could expect from making those changes? Mm-hmm.
Well, the pensions is the biggest component. Adding in everything all together, we've estimated $330 billion over 10 years.
Mr. Kyle or Mr. Biggs, one of you, if you could answer this, do you have any way to measure productivity in the federal workforce as you would, say, in the private sector? I mean, when you have 99-point-something% of people who are excellent, wouldn't that indicate that productivity is off the charts?
It is difficult. When I was at the Social Security Administration, we made efforts to measure productivity, but it tended to be a measure of outputs, a number of cases handled. A true measure of productivity measures the cost of inputs, the labor cost, the compensation cost, in order to then figure out the improvement of the output. So I don't think the federal government does a particularly good job of measuring productivity, although I will say it is not an easy thing.
Can you answer it in the context of the point Mr. Jordan made about they were only responding to 30% of the calls? I think that was the number he gave. Wouldn't that indicate a productivity problem?
What you want to know is how productivity grows over time and how many calls they're getting in. It's not a straightforward thing to answer. And I'll admit I don't know the IRS very well, so I don't want to act as if I know more than I do.
All right. Mr. Kyle, last question. What effect does the outdated nature of the current GS schedule have on hiring?
So that's actually one of the things that we would like to know more about. We don't have a very good sense of the data on hiring and retention and recruitment, and I think that in understanding both the current compensation system and others that might take its place, we would need to look further into that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman.